Welcome back to Call Her Daring, brought to you by Bagnet Company. Today, I am chatting with Heather, who you may know from TikTok as Hope Peddler. She and I are friends in real life, and I consider her to be an authority on today's topic, which is decentering men. If you don't already follow her, I highly recommend that you do so, not only for her decentering men content, but also for her articulate thoughts on everything from feminism, relationships, patriarchy, to social issues, and more. Thank you for joining me to talk about decentering men, one of my favorite topics, one of my favorite things, like things to watch videos on TikTok. I think I never even heard of decentering men until I got on TikTok, and I heard a lot of it from you. Your videos have been really helpful. So wanted to do a deeper dive into what it means to decenter men, who can decenter men, how we decenter men, like just talk about the whole thing. So let's do it.
Yes. This is also my favorite subject. So,
Okay, good.
but I also learned about it on TikTok. So,
Oh, you did?
hmm
I swear TikTok is the most revolutionary social media app that has ever come along. And so many people don't realize it. People who are not on TikTok think that it's all dancing. And when I tell people TikTok has changed my life, they don't
yes,
understand.
it's changed my life. It liberated me from so many limiting ideas.
Yep.
Like the way I live now is so different than the way I lived 4 years ago. And I swear to you, I would not have made these changes if I wasn't for TikTok. There were 3 or 4 creators. You know, I was using TikTok for 2 or 3 years before I started creating, and there were a handful of creators who their content literally changed my life. And now I'm mutuals with all of them, and I talk to them, and it's so cool because, you know, it's a few years of them basically freeing me from myself with these
Yeah.
concepts, with a lot of these concepts. Yeah.
Well, let me start by saying one of the videos that I saw was a woman saying that we shouldn't even call it decentering men because by
Yeah.
doing that, we are still centering men. We should
Yeah.
call it recentering women. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, so it was a woman who said we should stop even calling it decentering, and then I stitched that and told her like let's call it recentering. So
Okay.
yeah, that was not my idea, but the recentering was my idea, and I don't even know if it's recentering women or centering women. People have different ideas, but yeah, the general idea that when you say decentering men, men are still at the center of what you're doing. You know,
Yes,
I
exactly.
do think I do think the language is helpful because you're trying to show fish that you're in water, the water being patriarchy.
Okay.
And so before you can go to like centering fish, you still have to show them the ways in which they are swimming in patriarchy. So
Yeah.
I'm not like opposed to the idea of calling it decentering men, but I do think that like maybe in the future recentering women becomes more common, but I think we can use them interchangeably because
Okay.
you kind of have to like understand what something is in order to decenter it, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you have to break it apart and evaluate it. Okay, so what does it mean for anybody listening who does not know what it means to decenter men or center women? What does it mean to decenter men?
There's a big overlap between decentering men and deconstructing patriarchy. They're not identical concepts, but they work hand in hand. And I think we have to talk about them both kind of together. Um, so decentering men is like finding out all the ways in your life that your life is revolving around men, generally in personal romantic relationships, but not even that. Because like when I started this journey and I started looking at all of the ways, like how much bigger it was than just romantic relationships. And I think we start out talking about it in the context of romantic relationships and the ways that now we have all this data that shows that in heterosexual relationships, women tend to give, men tend to take, and to the extent that married men are happier, healthier, wealthier than single men, but married women are less happy, healthy, wealthy than single women. So basically, the two groups that do the best are single women and married men, because the institution of marriage tends to suck the energy out of women and hand that energy to men. That's what it is set up to do. And the part, I took these classes in college. I took a class called marriage in undergrad, and then I took a class called law and economics of work and family in law school. And I was so shocked at the data, which even showed that like liberal relationships where both people said, oh, we have an egalitarian relationship, we see one another as equals. The statistics on how they lived told a very different story. And in fact, when a woman made more than a man, and this is still true, she tends to do even more housework than when they make the same amount, because she's compensating for his,
Yes.
and this just goes into so many different elements of like, you don't even realize it's not even just the amount of domestic labor you're doing. It's not even just the amount of emotional labor you are doing. Like, you're making sure that you stay close in the relationship. You're initiating date nights, you're initiating whatever. But it's also the emotional labor of like catering to men who in this society have generally been allowed to basically go through life without really healing themselves and
Hmm.
without really getting to, so we're accommodating all of that. And so all of that sucks all of our energy dry and doesn't
Yeah.
leave us with much in the end. And even down to like the way we dress, the way we act, the way we speak, like so much of that has been informed our entire lives in so many subtle ways that we didn't even realize that were telling us, in order to be a valuable woman, you have to be wanted by men. And in order to be wanted by men, you have to be these things. And so many of us, without recognizing it, have spent our entire lives trying to construct ourselves of those things. And then,
Yep.
so waking up from that and unplugging from that, then you're kind of like, whoa, who am I? What do I want to be? If I don't have to filter my own self-image through the male gaze, then who am I? And
Yes.
it's really wild that most people don't think about this and that this is just now a conversation that we're having. Um, but yeah, it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal seeing so many women do this,
It
and it led to,
is
I mean, a lot of people know this that follow my content. It led to me leaving my relationship.
because you decentered.
Yeah, my relationship with a really good guy who I'm still friends with and respect and enjoyed and was attracted to, and my life is still better without him. Like, and that's what I need women to recognize, is that like I had one of the quote unquote good ones, right? A guy who identifies as a feminist, who's open to learning, who had done a lot of healing work on himself, who was really successful. Like, he had all the things. And my life is still better without him because of the amount of energy that it took to maintain that relationship. I
Yeah.
just gave a lot more, and despite his best efforts, like he just wasn't
Yeah.
capable. It's not that he didn't want to; he just wasn't capable of the kind of like emotional depth, intimacy, and support that I was. And so the relationship was always going to be lopsided.
So in that shift from centering him to centering yourself, what was your mentality like? Were you basically going through a process of making yourself the main character of your own life? Yes.
Yes,
Okay. So,
that's exactly what it was.
okay.
I had in my old house. So when I split, I moved. But in the year before I could sell my house, I had this huge chalkboard in my house. And I wrote on it in bright rainbow letters, "Make your life a love letter to future Heather." And every
Love
day I
it.
saw that. And then I wrote all the ways the promises I was going to keep to myself. And it started before I broke up with him. We started talking about splitting up maybe 3 or 4 months before we actually did. And during that time, I found myself, instead of daydreaming about how to keep the relationship, I found myself dreaming about what my life would be untethered. I could move because I was in a city where I had no community. I could move back to a city. I was getting really into tennis at the time. I could really pursue that. It wasn't even like, oh, I want to date other men. It was like, I could prioritize friendships. I could like whatever my hobbies were. And then whatever my passion was, because I always felt like I had a voice that I wanted to use for the betterment of the world, but I hadn't found a path to doing that yet. And I was daydreaming about all of that. And then the fact that I could feel my body getting so excited about the idea of pursuing my life mission instead of, it dawned on me that I had made him and his kids my mission.
Yeah.
And not intentionally, never knowingly. I never said they're the most important thing in my life. But what I did was, I would arrange my entire workday around their
Yes.
schedules, around
Yep.
their needs. I would, arrange my hobbies. I would schedule tennis from when, they wouldn't need me. Like everything was secondary to them. And he never reciprocated that. It didn't even occur to that man that he should be
Yeah.
doing the same thing. It didn't even, not once did it cross his mind that he should prioritize his kids and me like more than his work, right?
Yeah, his needs,
Um,
his wants, desires came first in your life, but it was not the
right.
same conversely.
Right.
Yes,
And I
exactly.
actually think he was right. I
Yeah.
resented that for a long time. I resented it for a long time that that I felt like I was priority number 3 or 4. But now I'm like,
Mhm.
that's the right priority for a romantic relationship. It's
You should be number
absurd that
1.
somebody convinced me that I had to be number 1, and that's absurd. I would have been more happy in that relationship had I prioritized me.
That leads me to my next question, which is, do you think you had to break up with him to decenter him? Is it possible for women who are going to stay in relationships, who are married or in long-term relationships with men, can they do the work of decentering without leaving their husband or their partner?
Maybe. I could not have done it. I don't think. I think this was absolutely necessary for me to even, I've been single for 2 years now, and I've spent these 2 years in this exploratory phase that I needed to remove all noise of other
Okay.
people's expectation. I needed silence to really meet myself again. I didn't need to be thinking, what did so and so want to eat? What do they want to do? Where do they want to go? Like, I needed to remove all of that noise so that I could sit with myself and be like, what do
Okay.
I want out of this life? That was for me. However, I've heard other women talking about how they've decentered their men in their relationships with great success. I do think it would probably be a slower process because
Yeah.
it's a day-to-day negotiation, right? You're renegotiating the way that the relationship is going to operate. So number one, you'd have to have a partner so committed and so invested, like a partner who actually gets that it was never healthy in the first place for them to center you.
Yep.
Um, somebody who understands, so somebody who he himself is deconstructing patriarchy. Like
Mhm.
if a man isn't deconstructing patriarchy, like actively in their day-to-day life, they're not worth being with, period, the end, full, like stop. I'm not interested in being friends with them. I'm not interested in dating them. I'm not interested in working with them. Like and I didn't understand all of that really until much later, but I think it's just so critical because patriarchy shows up in a million ways
Yeah,
in a relationship. It shades
of
every
course.
corner of the relationship, and people just don't realize it until you get out of it. But I've heard other women on TikTok particularly talk about how they have done that in their marriages and their relationships with success. And the things that I see are that they have partners who are continually saying, "Is that what you really want to do? I'm checking in here. Are you doing that for you or for us?" Like like almost like they're accountability partners on the woman's journey to decenter them. Like it
That's
has to be like
interesting.
yeah, it has to be like that. Like Mel Hamlet talks a lot about that. It has to be that level, I think, of commitment from your partner. But also, it's just like if you've been living with someone for 10 years and you try to reshape that whole relationship, that's going to require a lot of time and energy and commitment.
Absolutely.
And I didn't want to. And I loved him very, very much. But I just did not. I didn't have the energy in me to try to renegotiate the entire terms of our relationship. But some
Yeah.
women do have that. I also think that for some people taking maybe 6 months or a year apart could do that work for
Sure.
people. But what I think will happen 9 out of 10 times is that if a woman does that, she won't want to go back.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Call Her Daring is sponsored by Bagnet Company. Back in 2015, I started Bagnet Company after being fed up using public restrooms with no purse hooks. With the goal of keeping women's purses off of nasty restroom floors, I created Bagnet, the bag magnet, which turned out to be useful in countless other situations, and I sold nearly 1 million since then. What I loved most was that I was making women's lives just a little bit easier, so I dedicated my company to doing just that. I created Perch as a bag hanger for horizontal and non-metal surfaces. I designed the phone sling as a way to tote your phone and a few credit cards, perfect for dog walks, bike rides, and quick runs to the store. My latest creation, the City Sling, is perfect for all-day carrying in a lightweight nylon with a built-in water bottle compartment. Easier, better, more beautiful. It's not a tagline, it's a life mantra. When you came to the realization that he was centered in your life and you wanted to make this change, what were all the ways that you could see that, aside from what you've already mentioned, which is basically putting him and his kids first, Do you have any specific examples of how you centered him and how other women may be centering men that they don't even realize?
God, it was like down to my makeup choices. You
Yeah.
know, he was from Portland and he was very like, he liked the all natural thing. And I grew up in Texas and had been living in LA. So you can't exist without wearing makeup or people will treat you like you're a leper. And we met when he lived in Portland and I lived in LA. So I wore makeup. Not even what I considered to be a lot, but by his standards, it was a lot. And he would make comments like, I think it's weird that women wear makeup. I've never dated anybody that's worn makeup. And but at the same time, he would only tell me that I looked nice when I wore makeup.
Yeah.
And so I would make aesthetic dressing choices just based on what he liked without even I didn't even recognize that I would slowly wear less and less makeup, not because I was feeling like I wanted to wear less and less, but because that's what I thought he wanted. You know, if he liked a certain dress of mine, I'd wear that dress more, you know? Oh, food. So we're both vegan. And at the time, he really liked like super processed vegan meats, right? Which aren't my favorite thing, but that's what we would eat all the time because that's what he wanted to eat. And it never even occurred to me that it wasn't my favorite thing. I thought, we like this food. We enjoy this food. And then when we split up, I found myself without even choosing just buying different food. I didn't even say, I'm not going to eat that anymore. I just was like, whoa, I haven't bought any of that anymore. And I didn't even recognize I was doing that for him. There were so many little sacrifices that colored every part of the relationship that were, just had no idea that I was doing it for him. I just had
It's
no
so
idea.
insidious. It's
It's
absolutely, it just creeps
everywhere.
in every single tiny little way. I find myself with my husband, I will think about his comfort and his desire. Like if I'm planning a trip, I'm going to think about what he wants to do, what's going to make him comfortable. So many of my decisions, I think of him first before I think of
Yeah,
myself. And that's something I've had to unpack and really work on changing. Like, no, what do you want, Kelley? Figure
right.
out what you want first. That's what's most important here.
Yeah, I would even be like sitting on it, like the couch, being like, "What show do you want to watch? What do you want to watch?" And we would watch these shows that had violence in them, and I don't actually enjoy watching violence. Like I literally don't enjoy it. But
Yeah.
because those were his favorites, we would end up doing it, and it never even occurred to me that I didn't like it. It wasn't until after we broke up, and I would like turn the TV on, and then I would go to one of our favorite shows, and I would be like, "I don't want to watch this," and I'm like, "Oh my god, I've been watching that for like Walking Dead. I've been watching that for 8 years. I don't even like it. I don't even like
Wow.
it." You
Yeah.
know, it was just everywhere. And like, he was not a demanding person who needed to be centered. He would have actually preferred if I did not center him. It was too much for him. And yet I was conditioned my entire life to do it.
That is such an important point. So many of our men, our husbands, our partners are not saying you have to center me. We are just conditioned to do it from the time
Hmm.
we are born.
Yes. In every way. And then, yeah, but then also you set up these expectations in the relationship and then they do start to expect it. So like then it does get murky to get out of it, even though they never maybe expected it in the first place, you know? So yeah, it's just take I've just sat there for the last 2 years pulling apart all of my last relationships with men and being like, wow, do you know how many men I dated that I didn't even really like? I was just using them for the validation because my society said I wasn't a
Yeah.
good enough woman or a valuable enough woman unless I had a partner. Like, and those poor dudes, they didn't deserve for me to be using them. They were probably using me too, let's be real. But like, yeah, it's just so much, it's so much to unpack. It takes a long time to really thoroughly unpack it.
Yes, it does. And I think some women and definitely some men think that it equates to women hating men. And that's not what this is. This has nothing to do with hate. In fact, I know you love men. You've
Hmm.
had male partners, you have male friends. The way you talk about men, I can tell that you love men. But so this has nothing to do with hate. And it also doesn't mean that you can't have men in your life. So you can have male friends, you can have a partner, you can have a
Right,
husband. This doesn't mean like just extricating
right,
all the men from your life. This is reworking things so that you can lead your normal life and prioritize yourself the way that men have
yeah,
always done for
right.
themselves.
Yeah, I'm very close to my dad, and like my dad is part of the reason that my standards are what they are because my dad my dad was like raised Christian conservative, whatever. But he has just always had the belief that it's very obvious in the way he talks and the way he moves and the way he relates. He's just always had this underlying belief that like women are superior to men, mostly.
Oh, I
And he,
love
even from the
him.
time I was a, yeah, from the time I was a little girl, he told me, he said, he was like climbing the corporate ladder and he always had a team working underneath him. And he said, you know what? All else being equal, always hire the woman. She's always better. If she got to the same place that a man got to, she's going to be better. So he had teams of women working for him, and not in a creepy sexual like harassment way. But he was like that. Like he's like everything he did and the way he relates to people, the way he relates to rooms of people, is deference to women, despite growing up with a very patriarchal father. So like that, growing up with a man who revered women, a very smart man who revered women, and then getting to adulthood and meeting all these men who like genuinely thought my gender made me less valuable, less smart, less credible, less whatever, was a really massive shock to my system because I hadn't grown up with that. I hadn't even been exposed to that. Like so misogyny became very obvious to me and very loud to me because I didn't grow up with it. So yeah, I'm very close to him. I'm still close to my ex. I talk to my ex a lot now. We're friends, and I enjoy his friendship a lot better than I enjoyed being in a relationship with. Like
Oh, wow.
honestly, like
Makes
we're
sense.
yeah, I respect him as a person. I value him as a human being, but I don't want to take care of him every day. So yeah, you can love men and value them without putting them at the center of your life.
Exactly. What have been the benefits, the biggest benefits, because I'm sure there are many, the biggest benefits for you in decentering men?
My life is just so much more authentic, more colorful. Like, I had a year, and the year after I left him, I won the tennis championship of my whole city, and which was so cool. Something I did think I was gonna, but I just threw myself into that. I sold the house, moved to a new city, immediately made friends. You were my first friend here. I like found a yoga crew that I loved. So I started making content right when we broke up. I had never made content before. He tried to talk me into making content our whole relationship, but I started after we split up, and then within a year I had 100,000 followers, and that has opened other doors for me as well. That has opened a lot of doors for me. So yeah, the year after we split up, my life just like got lit on fire. Like everything just started to go in my favor and in exciting ways. I was finally using my voice and my skills for I like to refer to it as like lending my voice to the chorus of women trying to wake other women up. I got to join the chorus in like a meaningful way. And yeah, that has brought more meaning in my life than all of my relationships combined.
I bet. That is amazing.
Yeah, it feels more like why I'm on this earth. I'm
Yes.
finally doing what I'm on this earth to do, instead of like this stupid game where I pretend that a man's ambitions are bigger or better than mine or more important than mine. Like, let's be real. I am more talented than most of the men that I have met and more ambitious. Like, and yet instead of pouring that into something, I would pour it into them, which was dumb.
Yes. And so that's the difference, is pouring all this energy that we have innately, that women have, this light, this energy. I love it. I talk about it in my TikToks. We pour it into men. And when we turn the tables and start pouring it back into ourselves, we are so much better. We live, like you said, more authentically. We are happier, we are healthier. There's no reason to continue centering men when we benefit so much from centering ourselves. But we're made to feel ashamed of doing it, right? We're supposed to put ourselves last. That's what's
Hmm.
expected of us. You put your kids first, you put your
Hmm.
husband first, your partner first, and you should come last. Your needs come last. Oh, you need a few minutes at the end of the day. Okay, you take a few minutes. Like, that's it. That's what you get. And it's so tired. It's so old. It's just
Yeah, they
not.
call us selfish. If we pursue anything other than being in service, we are selfish. It's
Exactly.
absurd. It's absurd. Especially like you and I are both child free by choice stepmothers. So that puts us in a really unique position because we don't have the same expectations that are on us that biological mothers have.
Yeah.
So we don't have that pressure. But I still found myself prioritizing his kids more than he did.
Which is
you know?
crazy. That is
I
insane.
mean, I'm honestly glad that I did, because I love those relationships. Those relationships have lasted past the end of the relationship. My stepdaughter was here a few weeks ago visiting me. She's in college now. Like, so I am glad that I invested in them. Honestly, I'm glad I invested in them and prioritized them over him a lot of the times, because I did. Even though I was still modeling that patriarchal
Right.
circle of like, prioritizing somebody else, or but that was, they needed it because they were kids.
Yeah.
He's a grown-ass man, so you
Exactly.
know
Exactly.
it's different. I shouldn't have ever been. And like, the thing is that, like, I think a lot of men, particularly those who still have a lot of strong patriarchy running through them, they do want to be centered in their relationships. But I think there's a whole host of men that would actually be okay not being centered. That would
Mm-hmm.
actually be okay having a little bit of independence in their life.
Yeah.
I know that those men exist, but women, just, we don't know what to do with them yet. We will in the next 10 years. We will.
And you would think a man would understand the benefit of being with a woman who centers herself. She's going to be happier and healthier, and that's going to spill over. That energy, that happy, healthy energy is
Yeah.
going to spill over onto him. He's going to benefit. There's going to be
Yeah.
side effects that are beneficial to him.
Yeah. And like, men always say, "Oh, I fell in love with her, and then I fell out of love with her, but she became a different person." It's like, well, she became a different person because of you.
Because of
Like,
you, sir. Yes.
yeah, she centered you and lost her light, and then you were like, "Well, she doesn't have a light anymore. I don't love her." So I think if women do return to their light, what lit them up before they met their partners, that could actually help the relationship stay healthy, like,
Exactly.
genuinely. Um,
Exactly.
yeah, we just have to, like, empower women to do it and to show them, like, the actual tangible ways to do it. Watch the shows you want to watch, or just say, you know what, I don't want to watch TV. I want to do something else.
Yes.
There was just so, like, in my relation, I wanted to, like, go on walks every night after dinner. I love it. I love it. It's one of my favorite things. And my ex was like, no. So I didn't do it.
Yes.
I would
I
sit
know.
and
Isn't
watch
that
TV.
crazy?
It's
Isn't
crazy,
that
because I
crazy?
should have just said, okay, bye. I should have literally
I'm
picked the
going for a
dog up
walk.
and gone for a walk, because I love it. I love, like, ending my day with quiet, fresh air, petting people's dogs and cats, walking my dog. I love that. I love putting that period on my day. And he just refused, literally said, absolutely not. And I didn't do it. And now it's just, and that brings me so much joy every day. And it's like this little thing that I just didn't do the whole relationship that brings me so much joy. And I could have done it. I could have just said, all right, you watch one of your little violent shows. I'm going to go on a walk.
Go for a walk.
Or, like,
Exactly.
I like to read before bed, and he would, for like 15 minutes, that's what it takes for me to go to sleep. And he would be like,
Yep.
"Oh, the book light's too bright for me." And I'd be like, "Okay."
Too bad.
I'm like, oh.
Oh,
Meanwhile, I'd be like, I bought him like 3 different face masks to sleep under, eye masks or whatever. And he's like, "No, I'm not using those. You're just not
oh
going to
my.
read." And I'm like, "Oh my God.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and then
Because
I
he's
let
the
him.
center of the world
Yeah. And he
in
would
his mind.
snore and snore, but if he wore breathe right strips, he wouldn't snore. So I was like, "Hey, can you wear those?" And he's like, "Absolutely not." And I'm like, "Wait,
Oh,
so you get to sleep, but I don't get to sleep." Okay. But it was, I mean, I could give you 1,000 examples in the relationship of how, okay, I was just always folding into
absolutely.
his needs,
I
you
could.
know?
Yeah, I could too. I do the same thing, and I'm trying to break those habits. Um, this is a great segue into actionable steps that women can take, especially if they're already partnered. So let's talk about whether you're partnered or not. What are the like some really easy actionable steps we can start to take to start centering ourselves?
The one I actually don't hear talked about enough that I think everybody should prioritize, because everybody talks about decentering in relationships, like the examples we've given. But, like, you got to get underneath that, to the whole narrative we're living out. Okay? The narrative of our existence that we're living out. And do you know how we acquired that narrative? Through stories told by men. All of the books that we read, all of the movies that we watched, all of the TV shows that we watched, especially in our generation. Like, there started to be some diversity in entertainment, not nearly enough, but some, about over the last 10 years. But prior to that, good Lord,
Yeah.
every
Oh,
single TV show or movie told some version of woman who has this bright, vivid life, friends, career, health, fun, but realizes none of it means anything if she doesn't have someone to share it with, right? Like, it was like, that was basically the story of literally everything.
I know. Yes.
Um, and then she meets a man, and suddenly the rest of her life is given meaning because someone's witnessing it. Particularly, a man is witnessing it and validating it. Therefore, she is a full humanity granted by virtue of being witnessed by a man, right?
Yep.
And men, and all of their movies, they got to just be heroes, and then like love on the side. Love was the icing on their cake. It
Yeah.
was our whole goddamn meal, right? And that is so insidious. And it gets in like underneath your skin in ways you don't even recognize. But not only that, all of the movies and the books and the TV also showed us that like the wise ones were the men, the natural leaders were the men, and that women were not those things. And we've internalized that so much that now we can't even unpack it. Like, we do studies where we have, people rate women who are speaking on like competence. And it's like, if she's too pretty, or if she's too funny, or if she's, she can be likable or competent, but not usually both. Like, and it's because of all of the storytelling we have internalized.
Yeah.
So I like to tell people, you have to be radical about the storytelling you consume, because stories are what creates humanity, right? Like, the book Sapiens talks about, the one thing that differentiates us between other animals is we tell stories about what we are, and then we live into those stories, right? Like, money is just a story. We believe it has value, therefore it does. Like, but if you ever heard about a bank run, the moment we stop believing that it has value, it actually doesn't have value, right? Like, all of humanity is that way. Whatever story we're living into becomes true by virtue of us believing it. And we have let men tell all the stories.
Yep.
And so I have just gotten very vigilant. If I am watching a show or a movie or whatever, and it starts to like prick that little teeny little hints of patriarchy, I will literally pause it. I will see who wrote it. And if there's not a woman that wrote it or directed it, I will stop watching it, because I don't want that shit in my brain anymore. I
Yes.
read books written by women now because I'm
Good.
so tired of that shit in my brain without my consent. I
Yep.
turn on a TV, it's so passive, and you're like, "Oh, that show looks good." So passive. And then you're like, you start to get little bitty hints of it, and you're like, "What?" And it's just like little bitty icks, and you're like, "It was written by three men," right?
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
so I think women need to divest from the storytelling of men. I think
Agreed.
like in a big way. I don't think people get how important this is. Like, we need to not show our daughters any of this shit,
Love it.
because that's where I got it from. My
Yep.
parents never
Media.
told me. My dad never said you need to center a man. My dad never. I got it
Yep.
from my culture.
Yeah. Yes. The reading books, especially choosing books, especially that are nonfiction, about self-discovery or self-improvement, about figuring out who you are. Yes,
Yeah,
unpacking, like, pick female authors every time. That's
oh my
definitely an
god.
actionable step. Yes, we should be listening to women, not men.
Like, I cannot tell you how many the self-help, spiritual growth, like, men have turned out to be so massively disappointing or problematic. Like, very, very, very few of them make it to the end of their career without something coming out that like they're basically charlatan.
Yep.
You know, I read a book recently that I like loved. It was a spiritual book written by a man. I'd read it like 5 years ago. Then I read his other book, and I was so appalled at how deep his sexism and patriarchy went in the second book that it ruined even my ability to. Then I did research, like, how could that first book have been profound? And guess what? I bet you can guess how it was so profound.
I don't know.
He borrowed it all from other people.
Oh
It was
God.
all teachings from other people that he passed off as his own because he reworded it slightly.
Wow.
So when I read it, I was like, wow, that's so profound. Yeah, because it's from like ancient teachers. And he's just passing it off as an idea he had over breakfast. Oh,
Wow.
I was enraged at like
What
how many
who's
of
the
the
author? Who's the author?
um is it Michael Singer? I always mix up Michael and Peter Singer. I think one of them's the animal rights guy.
Is that
The
the
one who wrote,
Untethered Soul?
yes,
Untethered
yes,
Soul.
that's the
Okay,
book.
yeah.
The Untethered
Okay.
Soul, but
Yeah, I have it.
The Untethered Soul was the one that I loved, and then his second book with the Surrender Experiment was the one that I was like, this dude breaks down every miracle or special coincidence that happened over like a 40-year period of his life, down to like this assistant showed up at the right time, right when I needed them to do the da-da-da, like talk. And yet in all 40 pages, there's one mention of got married and had a daughter, and then never mentions them again in all of the miracles, magic, meaning of his life until literally 40 years later when he references that they were in a hotel. And I was like, oh, they're still alive. Nobody would have
Oh,
known.
wow.
And he talked about how he like meditates for 2 hours every morning. Then he was so in love with his work that he would work for 10 hours. Then he would meditate another 2 hours. And I'm like, you
Oh,
literally have never seen your daughter. I bet you don't know the first thing about your daughter. And like, why are we like acting like that's, you can be profoundly spiritual while disregarding your, children and
yeah,
relationships. Like it's so weird how we think that meditating is spiritual, but like creating ceremony and celebration for your children and meaning for your children and whatever practices that you develop as a family, whatever rituals, like that is more spiritual than you sitting on a floor thinking about yourself. Like,
absolutely.
anyway, I could go on. Like almost the only person whose work I really still do value is Eckhart Tolle's work. But I haven't revisited it, so who knows if I would still feel that way now. But when it
Yeah.
did have a really big positive effect on me at the time, and I'm leaving it. I'm not going to revisit.
Don't dig.
Leaving it. Leaving
You
it.
won't like what you find. Yeah. Yeah. I'm reading The
Mhm.
Power of Now right now.
Yeah,
Um,
that changed my life. It did.
yes. And
That
it's
one
going
and
to change
Another
mine.
Earth or New Earth or whatever. Those two books really did change my life. So I'm
Yeah. I'm
just
excited to finish it.
I hope
Yeah.
that guy
Just
nothing. I hope nothing comes out about him because I'm going to
don't
be
Google him.
heartbroken.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think one of the best things that I have done to like an actionable step to decenter my husband is to be constantly asking myself, what do I want? And it could be the smallest thing, like from what I wear to the a bigger thing, like we have an evening free and an opportunity to perhaps spend some time together or not. What let's just say it's an evening free, and I have now started thinking, what do I want my evening to look like, rather
Yeah.
than yeah, what does he want to do? What's he going to be happy with? What's going to make him happy? Which is what I've thought for 12 years that we've been together, and probably thought with every other partner prior to him. But now, like all the time, what do I want? What is it that I want to do? Where, say, go, that is what I'm doing now. And that has instigated, I think, a really big shift just in my mentality. So I think I would recommend that for women listening who are like, okay, how can I start? Just start thinking, what do I want? Just think it constantly. What do I want right now? And then do it.
Have you had to negotiate that in your relationship, or has he been open to it?
So I communicated with him, hey, I need to start centering myself. I need to stop centering you and start centering myself.
Mhm.
And he wasn't really sure what that meant. He's like, what does that mean? But I explained to him what I felt that meant, like that I had always prioritized him, his feelings, his desires, his needs, just constantly in from big ways to small, and that I needed to stop doing that. I needed to start thinking about what I want and actually start implementing the things that I want. And he has been okay. Like it hasn't been a major issue. He's been okay with it. But I
Okay.
also I'm keeping it pretty private. I'm not including him in a lot of
In the
my
process.
thoughts. Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. So it is definitely it's a solo journey, I think.
Yeah, it has to
But
be because the
that's
moment
what it
you
is.
start running it by him, you're just centering him again.
Exactly. Yeah. No,
The
we're not
moment you're
asking for
like seeking permission or affirmation or even like validation about that path, you're centering him
exactly.
again. You know.
Yeah, exactly. And I let him know not because I needed his permission, but because I just like to communicate. I like to tell him how I
Yeah.
feel and what I'm thinking. And so I wanted him just to be aware of like the shift that was going on within me. And he's
Yeah.
been pretty cool with it. Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
I think a lot of men would probably be open to it if they understood it. It might take some pressure off of the relationship because I think one of the most toxic things in our narrative is also that like romantic love is the end all be all, that it's supposed to be the thing that makes your life magical and gives it meaning and that brings you happiness. And I think that that's just too much weight for romantic love. I don't think it's meant to bear that weight. I think romantic love is primarily for growth, self awareness, it's a mirror that gets held up to you. And we act like it's supposed to be like the big bag of happiness where we go whenever we need happiness. And it always cracks under that weight. That's why the vast majority of marriages, even though, they either end or they're unhappy, like it's as an institution, marriage doesn't work for most of the people that do it. And I think a lot of it is because it can't bear the weight of having to carry both people's happiness. It's
Yes.
not serving that function that we were sold that it was going to serve. And that's not what it was ever really meant to be. I've like read a lot about matriarchies, and like they just look at romantic love so different, like in matriarchal cultures, right? It isn't
Mm-hmm.
the center of their lives. It is just a thing that adds to their lives. It's additive, and they have more passion, right? Because they're not
Yeah.
like combining their lives and trying to be roommates and best friends and adventure partners and co-parents. They're not doing all of that together, which tends to kill the romance. They do all of whatever they want to do, and then they have this person with whom there's a little distance. There's just some space. There's room to grow into new versions of yourself and fall in love with each other anew. All of those things. So like I now think like if you want real long, like more than a couple years romantic love that feels like love and not like friendship, I think you can't live together. I think most people would be better served not living with their part if that's what you want. Like I have a good friend who I've had this conversation with, and she said, well, I would rather have the partner and the best friend in my house than to have passion. And I'm like, that's a fair choice. That's a fair choice if that's the choice that you want to make.
Interesting.
Like to have a life partner and forego the passion. But for me, I've done that. I would rather have the passion, which means no one's living in my house. There's no man that's living in my house ever again. I hope, God, I hope I hope I don't change my mind.
Passion or not, yeah, you don't want a guy up in there anyway, no
I
matter
just
what.
don't want a man in my house anymore. I like my house clean and quiet. I like it quiet. I like being able to hear the whisper of my own needs. And I can't
And
hear
you
that
can,
when
yes,
other people are
you
here. I
can do
can't.
what you want. You can watch what you want. When you want to go for a walk, you go for a walk, and you
Yeah.
don't need to tell anyone or ask their permission or see if they want to go with you. Yeah, there's so many
Like
benefits to living
I
alone.
love girl dinner. I love not being like, well, what is he gonna want tonight? Because there are so many times that I would like, I'm not that hungry. I'd rather just have a little snack. But I'm like, but he's coming home after like a 10-hour work day. I'm gonna make some food. Right? Like,
Yes,
so much
absolutely.
of my life was that. And now I get to just make the sandwich, with like whatever. So yeah, it is definitely works better for me. It may not work better for everybody. I'm very privileged. I can afford to do it without any financial stress. That is not the case for most people. So I get it. I understand that a lot of people make that choice for financial reasons or because they have to. But yeah, if you can afford it, man, there's nothing like living alone. It feels so luxurious.
Exactly.
So luxurious.
Have you gotten any like any flack or negative feedback in regards to you centering yourself? Your ex as well as just society, people in general who see you living your best life and don't like it.
No, I don't think
TikTok.
so.
What about
It's kind
TikTok
of,
commenters?
oh, I mean, my journey on TikTok, I think, is different than a lot of people's. 99% of my comments are positive and supportive. I very seldom, and it may be because I used to do a lot of clapbacks where I would like rip people a new one. And so I scared people, or people are like, she's a lawyer, and they perceive that to mean that I could like do something about it if they said something, which I can't. But for whatever reason, I don't get a lot of hate, and I don't get a lot of personal attacks every now and again, but it's pretty rare. It's pretty rare. I get way, way more supportive comments and messages. In fact, I almost never get negative messages. I think like the most aggressive message I ever got was when I came out like on October 8th as being pro Palestine, and I had a couple Zionist women that said some nasty things to me in my DMs. But other than like that's like pretty much it. Like, I mean, I've had men leave trashy comments, but like block. But it's
Yeah,
so
exactly.
few of them. It's just so few of them that it doesn't really even register on my radar. It
Okay.
just flies right off. And then my journey with my ex has been interesting because, like, I've actually, like, as we became friends again, I've talked to him about all of these things. And he is, like, such an advocate for what I'm doing. Like, he
Wonderful.
thinks like it would have made our relationship better, I think, if I had done this during our relationship. And it would have,
Okay.
but I still wouldn't go back and change the way that it went. I'm still happy with the way that it went. But yeah, I think he sees, I think all along he was kind of rooting for me to find this on a deep level.
I love that you did this and that you talk about it because you had the good relationship. You had the relationship that women want, that women
Yeah.
strive for. You had the good guy who's the feminist, who valued you, who thought you were the smartest thing, who loved you, who treated you well. And you still, once you got out, you realized how much happier you are without him.
Yeah.
That is
I mean, to be
so
fair, like in the last couple years, he got very distant. He was an avoidant. He had some issues,
okay.
emotional issues. So like treated me well, yes, to the extent that he could. But he shut himself down. So we grew cold even though we respected each other. It did grow cold. So it wasn't great
Okay.
the last 2 years. There was always respect, and he always like treated me with a lot of respect, and he made me feel for the most part valued. But like I tell you what, as soon as I ended it with him, he's made me feel valued every day since then, like because he knows what he lost, you know. So and you know, he's happy that we're at least friends, and like, you know, like there's never a call he doesn't answer now, there's never a text he doesn't respond to now, like in our relationship, because I think I lost the version of myself that he fell in love with in the beginning. You know,
Yes.
I walked away from myself in service of him, and he never asked for that. And now I'm
Yeah.
back. I'm back, and like everyone loves it, you know? So, and it's really great. I'm started to subscribe to the idea of a relationship anarchy. I don't know if you've heard of it, but like letting relationships evolve and be what they're going to be without any sort of like hierarchical romantic relationships, different like our relationship was great for 5 6 years, and then it was less great, and now that we've shifted into friendship, it's good again. And I think that
Okay.
like I think I like that idea of relationships, because I don't think most romantic relationships should probably last more than 10 or 15 years. I think most of them probably run out of the runway, because if they're I really believe that romantic relationships are for growth and to get to know yourself and to see yourself. And I think most people will eventually grow in different directions.
Yeah.
And I think if you choose not to explore that direction you want to grow in, you do so at great personal sacrifice. And so I think like the best lived life probably is like you're 10, 15 years in a relationship, maybe you're single for 5, maybe you're 10, 15 years in a relationship, maybe you're single for 10. Like I think probably for me anyway, the richest life looks something like that. But
Mhm.
I don't believe that you like love somebody and then you just like eliminate them from your life either.
Right.
So, you know, I'm friends with my last 2 exes who I literally talk to both of them every month. So,
Amazing. Do
yeah,
you think you'll ever write a book on centering women or decentering men?
I am writing a book, a fiction book about what happens to society if enough women do it.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, like kind of a model for how we get to matriarchy by virtue of decentering men. um,
Killer.
with some time travel, because I love time travel.
Yeah.
It lets you do a lot more with the plot than you could do if it's linear. you know, like I can make things happen faster. In other words,
Yeah.
like in our lives, like the matriarchy might be when we're 80 or 90, but I can make it happen faster with some time travel. So that's what I'm
All
doing.
right.
But
When's the
yeah,
book going to be finished?
oh God, I don't know, man. I keep I've written like more than half of it, and then I go back and I'm like, no, I want to ditch this character and write a different character. I want to change this, I want to change that. So I'm still
It's a
working on
work
it,
in
but
progress.
I know what it's going to be. I know where it goes. I'm just like getting to know my characters better, and you know,
Cool.
mhm.
Well, whenever
It's
it's done,
fun.
I
I love
can't
it.
wait to read it.
Like nothing is more fun for me than writing books, writing fiction. I love it, love it, love it. It's so fun.
It's such a cool creative outlet. I love writing too.
Yeah, it's so healing, it's so
Yeah.
therapeutic.
And something you can do when you center yourself and
Yes,
prioritize your wants and
it
needs.
was so wild. Like the first 6 months on my own. I was just like a kid in it. I thought I would be so sad. I thought I would be so sad. I thought I'm willing to be sad for like 6 months to 12 months, however long the sadness lasts, in order to see what's on the other side of that. I'm like walking into the cave. I know it's going to be dark for a year, and then the other side of it's going to be bright, but that's not what happened. It was bright right away. I was sad. I did miss him, but it was the missing him wasn't as loud as exploring my life anew, because it was the first time in my life when I was like financially secure, had my
Right.
health, I had hobbies that I loved, I had a passion, I had an outlet, I had friends, and it was like I couldn't figure. I mean, every day was like, what do I do today? I'm going to go on a walk. I'm going to read a book. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to, it was just so much brightness in my life that had nothing to do with like, haha, he's a jerk and he's out. It had everything just to do with like, but yeah, the quiet of my own brain and not having to have to think about anybody else. And it was really, really nice.
That's amazing. I love your story because there's so much like hope and optimism in it that I think women can pull from. I mean, you're Hope Peddler, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's just so much there that I think is encouraging for women who so many women I think fear the fear being alone, fear being single, fear the unknown of leaving that partner that they've been with for a long time and not knowing what it's going to be like, but you are living proof that it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing
Yeah.
when you center yourself.
Yeah. And I think like everyone's journey is different. I have a lot of
Sure.
privilege that allows me to do all of these things that a lot of people don't have. But um, yeah, I think a lot of women will be surprised on what's on the other side of leaving their romantic relationship. Like, what about you? Like, if you found yourself single again, do you think you would ever marry again?
I do not. I don't think I'd live with another man ever again, and I definitely know that I would not marry again. And I feel like so many married women, there are women who say they're happily married, and I would say I'm
Yeah,
one of them, who say never again. I will never
yeah,
do it again. Like I'm happy now, yes, but if and when it were to ever end for whatever reason, never doing it again. And that says a lot
yeah. That's all my
to
comment section are full of that. It's full of single women being like never again. It's full of married women being like never again. Nobody is saying anything different than that. It's crazy. I have over the years have gotten so many messages from people that are like, I left my partner because of your content. And then other people that say, you saved our marriage because he agreed to watch your content with me. And
oh
I was like,
wow,
right on, right? I like
how
both of those.
wonderful.
That's both fine.
Yeah, that's
That's
killer.
great. Yeah. Whatever, like some people's journey is meant to be together. And I'm not like saying that you should never do that. I'm just saying
Yes,
put it in perspective because it's
absolutely.
probably in the wrong perspective for 99% of women, heterosexual women.
Agreed. And you can be happily married and decenter your husband. And I'm not saying you have to split up to be happy and you don't have to split up to center yourself, but it does say a lot when women who have the experience of marriage and long-term relationships are saying
Yeah.
like, yeah, yeah, I'm
I
never
would
doing it
never do
again
it.
because you may be happy, but you realize how much it takes out of you and how much you are not able to focus on yourself in those relationships.
Yeah, like I was telling you that I just bought a van RV, and the woman who I bought it from, her husband had passed away right after she got it, and so she's older, and she said, I loved him, but man, if I had only known how much I would thrive independent, I will probably would have ended the marriage. She's like, these have been the best years. She's like, I'm just thriving. And I love independence and I never knew how much I could love it. And I'm just sad that I didn't learn it at your age. She's like, if I
Wow.
could just go back in time and tell 40 something me, and I just think that's a really common feeling.
I
I
do
had
too.
in my last neighborhood, I had a woman that lived across the street. She was married to a pastor. He was very patriarchal. She was very sweet. And he passed away while I lived there. And I was like, do you need anything? Do you want me to like walk your dog? Bring anything over to you? Like, she was just beaming. She was just like, you know what? He died the way he wanted to die on one of his hunting trips. And you know what? God needed him. God wanted him. And you know what? I'm good. And she was the happiest. There were people at her house every day. That woman had so many friends. Like everybody was visiting her grandkids, her friends, her church friends. She was out walking all the time. Like she was thriving.
I love that for her. That's so cool.
I know, but I've heard a lot of stories like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think a lot of women don't understand until they've done it once and then left, and then because when you're young, you don't know yourself really well enough. So like, I wouldn't have even known these things that do make me happy now. It took me a lot of life to figure out what makes me happy.
Yeah.
So there's something to be said for like becoming single again in middle age. There's something
Yes.
sweet about that. It's really
Well,
sweet because you still have half your life.
yes. And we're taught that a man is going to make us happy. And then you hit 40, 45, 50 and you go, no, that's not true. I still have time to actually be happy with myself.
Yeah, there's so much life yet to live, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
I know.
You have the simultaneous feeling of there's so much life left to live, but I'm halfway through, so I need to get down to what I came here for.
Exactly.
And
What
for
is my purpose?
me, like getting down to what I came here for meant I got to remove men from the equation for a little while. I mean, I'll date again probably, but it's so
Sure.
weird. I haven't even wanted to. I haven't even wanted to. I mean, I had a little
I don't think
fling.
it's that weird.
I
Yeah.
had a little fling after the breakup, palate cleanser as they call it. But like other than that, like it was definitely meant to be short term, and it was. But I've just been so content.
Yeah.
Not
I love
one
it.
day have I woken up and been like, you know what? I think I want to date.
Oh
Like
no.
I haven't run across one man that I've been like, you know what? No, no. Every man I'm just like,
Well, I'm so
not
happy
yet,
for you. I
not
love
yet.
it. Like I said, I love that your story is so full of hope and optimism, and you're just happy. You're glowing. It's obvious. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast to
Yeah,
talk about this with me. This has been great.
yeah, definitely. Always good to talk to you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Call Her Daring podcast. You can find me and Call Her Daring on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Follow for even more content and conversations about women being radically honest about the female experience. Please join me here every week for a new episode of Call Her Daring, and let's continue the powerful tradition of storytelling with the goal of informing and educating us all, so that we may step into our truest selves and realize our full potential as powerful women.